Hello and welcome to Cinema Craptaculus, where we say a bad film is just as hard to make as a good one, just a lot easier to make fun of. With me is my uncrappy co-host,
JDH. And Dave and I were lucky enough to see an advanced screening of the much anticipated, very delayed science fiction epic, DUNE. So before the movie actually hits theaters, we wanted to give you a quick Cinema Craptaculus spoiler-free preview.
And for any new listeners, the Cinema Craptaculus Podcast Network hosts all kinds of shows. Join us as we review movies, debate movies, and talk all things Hollywood. Our shows include The Expanded Universe with John, Doc, and S'more as they chat all things Hollywood. Flip it to the B-sides for those rare streaming gems that Dave, Tara, and Adam discover online. And travel through the terror tunnel with Steph and her amazing guests for all things horror. Then join the discussion as JDH moderates the real debate where we debate movies. And of course, the one that started it all, Cinema Craptaculus, where Steph, Dave, and John take a hard look at the movies that are hard to look at. Whew, that was a lot of information. And let me just throw in one more thing is, wherever you listen to us, whether it's iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, anywhere else, like and rate us. Just hit that like button, hit that follow button, and give us a good rating if you're enjoying us, because it really helps us get the Craptaculus word out there. Oh, that was the next line in the script, and I totally took it from you.
Yeah, you just
JDH.
completely stole my thunder. I was going to help you out there because you had so much to say earlier, but Dave has pretty much said it all. So that simple little like button, go ahead, hit it. And with that, let's jump into a quick little banter about a film we saw yesterday. What's your background with Dune? Have you read the books? You saw the 80s film?
This was announced, it was supposed to come out in 2019 or 2020?
I think early 2020, yeah.
Early 2020, I was very excited because the trailer looks amazing. Great special effects, and I knew it was coming, so I wanted to read the book before I saw this version of the movie, just to understand it. It's a 800 page book by Frank Herbert. I think it came out in the 60s or the 70s. It is dense with mythology. I read it. Mm-hmm. I think back in the early 2000s, I bought it and tried to read it, never got past page 10.
Yeah.
But this time I kind of forced my way through. And the one thing I realized about the book, it's kind of like a Shakespeare play. It's almost in 5 acts. There's a lot of like big political and mythological action, but it all takes kind of place off screen. You know, it's like, and I feel like that's very Shakespearean, where it's taking place all off stage, and they talk about it, and it's something to get a little used to. So I've always wondered, like, how are they going to condense all this into a 2-hour movie? I watched the 1980s movie, which I think adapts the book in a really great way. But it's so hard to follow because unless you've read the book, you're like, what is going on
so
here?
Confusing. Yeah. I remember seeing that film as a kid in the theater, and for me, I had, saw a commercial or something for it, and it just looked like a fun science fiction-y, Star Wars-y kind of thing. And I went in, and it's so heady and so complicated. Like as a kid, I just remember, oh wow, big worm things. Like that's kind of what I walked away with. Like that was cool. But it was way too much to absorb as a kid because I didn't realize, I don't even think my parents realized when they dropped me off. That's not really a kid's movie. That wasn't the intention.
No. And one of the things I liked about this movie was I feel like they gave a really good base for all the mythology that's in the book that you can follow along more so than the 80s movie.
And for me, I tried reading the book early on, actually in the pandemic, and it was so dense for me that I couldn't get through it. Whether it's my ADD or dyslexia, it was too much information, too many different languages. And I, struggled with like Game of Thrones. I had the same sort of thing, or Lord of the Rings. But I was able to get through most of those, where Dune was really more complicated. So for me, where I'm coming at from this conversation is more of just a film fan, a science fiction fan.
Yep.
Do you feel like it's important to kind of have that foundation from the book, or do you feel like I'm glad I had it, or it wouldn't have really mattered to me?
Right away, I felt like, okay, I think people who didn't read the book can follow this. There's a lot of exposition at the beginning of the movie, but it's woven in there But you do have to pay a little bit of attention just to like get it.
Yeah, no, I think they did a great job with that. It just simplifies it. It's easy for the audience to digest it while the character is also digesting this information. So what's your gut reaction to the film?
First of all, this is the first movie I've been to, I think, since The Rise of Skywalker in 2019.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like the first movie theater experience.
Yeah.
And knowing that Rise of Skywalker was my last, you can see why I've never been to a movie since, because my love for movies was destroyed that night.
So true.
Jokes aside, this is my first movie experience in close to 2 years.
Yeah.
Looking at that screen in the very first moment the film starts and this bass line like hitting you right in the chest with this quote, it was just a spectacular moment to be at a theater. One of the things about Dune, the book, is it's so cerebral. It's so in your head. It's so about being told what's going on and not watching what's going on. And it's so inside the characters' heads. You know what they're thinking. And I think that this adaptation does a good job of representing that. I think Paul is a very interesting character. Basically, he's this is overstating it. He's a kind of like a whiny child or a wandering child who discovers his place in the world, and when he does, he grabs onto it. And I think playing that character, it could be easy to play it very whiny, and he does it. Everyone else around him, Thanos, Aquaman, they're all great. The woman who plays Paul's mother is fantastic.
Yeah, Rebecca Ferguson was fantastic in this, 100%.
And I thought the dad who played the Duke Atreides was really fantastic portrayal.
Yeah.
The contrast of the medieval kind of set pieces, because everything was very stone or water or sand, and it felt very much like these vast rock installations that weren't created by metal or sci-fi ways. They look like they're built.
Yeah.
And they're massive locations, and those were great to see. And then the sci-fi elements, like the I think they're called dragonflies, the planes that they fly in, the spaceships, the soldiers, all tremendous costuming, tremendous special effects work. It was amazing.
I'll say this. I came into this with really, really high expectations. I loved the trailer. I like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the books or anything, but for some reason, just that trailer and these sci-fi images were so appealing. And I've really loved the director's past work. I love Arrival, and the sequel to Blade Runner I thought was very well done. So I was very excited because I've got friends that are huge fans of Dune that are just hungry, thirsty for a really good telling, the cinematic telling of this story. And so their enthusiasm was also spilling over. And then I heard the news that this played very well overseas at a festival. There was a standing ovation. And I'll say this, everything about all the elements, individual elements, are fantastic. Like, as you were saying, like the special effects are absolutely phenomenal. The production design, amazing. I loved the soundtrack and the sound effects. I loved the acting, the casting. Every frame of the movie feels like a piece of art. For me, however, all of those amazing elements combined didn't quite equal an amazing, mind-blowing, final finished product for me.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, there's so much to love about this. And if you're a fan of Dune or you're eager to see this movie, please go see it in the theater.
Yes.
Because as Dave mentioned, like when this thing starts, like to feel the power of the sound system in this theater, the subwoofers, it just resonated into my chest. And I felt it. And I was like, oh my God, it's so good to be in a theater. And I love how the sound design is physically resonating in my body right now. Like I loved it. So absolutely give this film a chance in the theater. And I'll say without any spoilers, for me, just all of these elements somehow didn't quite make a finished film. We know that this is part 1 of 2, so we know that there's more of this story to tell. For me, this didn't feel like the end of Fellowship of the Ring, where Sam and Frodo are walking off in the woods, and you feel like, oh, I've just seen a complete story. I know there's more to it. I've got 2 more films to see. This is a great breather to pause and then anticipate the film coming out. For me, this felt more like if you were to end Jaws at the moment the three men are embarking out to go find and hunt the shark. Like, if you know that shot where they push into the skeletal jaws and you see the orca, the boat sailing off into the horizon, if that was to just fade to black and the movie's over, that's how this felt to me. Because it didn't feel like you have to have the end. You have to have smile, you son of a bitch. You've got to have the shark blow up to make a complete movie. That doesn't mean that everything up to that moment was bad. It just means you need to have an ending to make the whole thing fit and feel like a whole movie. This really did end in a way that I was like, what? I want more.
I think having read the book, this is where I thought it might end, where it ended, and it is the perfect place to end, except for that fact that it does feel like they just disembarked to go get the shark, and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Wait, that credits? Really? Right now?
Right now? Yeah, like I gotta wait how long to see what happens?
And I think this director, I'm not even going to venture to say his name because I know I will mispronounce it. I think this director is really good with methodically slow shots. It's something I noticed about Blade Runner, 2039? Or maybe 2040. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But in this, I feel like the political drama of it all is a kind of darkness, and then you're slowing all the scenes down a little bit with long shots and pauses between dialogue. It just, all of it felt a little heavy to me. Look, it's one of those things that I think I say this a lot. I looked at the runtime. It was 2 hours and 36 minutes, and I'm like, this could probably be 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Easily. I think this could have easily capped out at just over 2 hours.
Because those long shots, they're not holding my attention. And it's not because I have ADD. It's because I'm ready to move on to the next shot. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, okay, we get it. It's the hallway, or it's exterior of something.
Well, it's like I say, like all of these elements
the next thing.
In and of themselves, like that shot that you're describing, are beautiful. They're gorgeous. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that it could be trimmed down a little bit. Like less is more in a way.
Hey, Craptaculars, we'll be right back.
Hey, this is Dave. We recognize that systematic racism exists, and one of the best ways to overcome it is by amplifying the voices that need to be heard. To continue that mission, every month we'll share a podcast or charity to support. This month, we're supporting the Black Fairy Godmother Foundation, whose mission is to restore Black and brown families' stability by removing the barriers that keep them in abject poverty and domestic violence situations. You can find more information and donate at blackfairygodmother.org.
And now, back to the show.
With that, too, I would say there was a little bit of fun, a little bit of humor thrown in, I'd say, from Jason Momoa specifically. I kind of wish there was more. And I don't mean fun in the way of, like, Marvel movies having one-liners and, like, snappy banter. Correct. It doesn't need to be that. But I did feel like the movie needed a little bit of levity. In a big science fiction epic like this, I really want to passionately be rooting for the heroes and feel like a part of the fun and adventure. And I think that's one thing that this film was slightly missing, was just the fun. Like, it was all very interesting, but it wasn't like super fun.
Yeah. It was weighed down by the heaviness of all the characters in the situations that they're in.
Yeah.
Everything was high stakes, and it felt like it was just almost like thumb screws from the beginning all the way to the very end.
Yeah.
And I agree. I wanted a little more lightness.
Yeah, and I completely agree. It would have helped with just getting caught up and really being emotionally involved with the characters, because I feel like every scene gives me the information I need. Like, oh, the father loves his son and the son loves his father. Like, there's things like that. Like, the dialogue tells me that, but I didn't feel like in my heart I wasn't emotionally involved with some of these characters the way that I get in, like, a Lord of the Rings movie or other science fiction or fantasy type films, even a Star Wars.
Yes.
You really want to internally be like rooting and cheering along with some of these characters, and I just didn't quite
especially when it's Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh my God, I can't even
really
that's a rabbit hole I cannot get down right now. That whole absolute disaster. But I'll say this, and hopefully this comes out as more of a compliment than taking away like a negative from it. But I almost feel like Warner Brothers should have looked at this property and said, we have an opportunity here because of streaming services now to create an epic television series or streaming series where this story almost deserves and needs that time to build characters and tell these stories. And I mean, you've read the book. Maybe that would be too much. It would be too long. But it's like, in one way, 2.5 hours was like they were trying to cram so much in, but we are actually asking for less. But in a weird way, I'm actually asking for more to like really allow me to get to know these characters better and really tell this rich story with the same level of production value. Because like I said, the production design, the shots, the special effects, like the design of those ships, everything was so awesome and meticulous. It was beautiful, but I'd almost rather see it as a series.
I think what we're kind of saying is like, if you're going to use that much real estate, meaning time, use it more wisely and really fill it.
And also just in terms of an audience member digesting the amount of information you need to really absorb this story. It's like, oh, if this was a 40-minute episode or a 50-minute episode, similar to Mandalorian or something, or Game of Thrones, you can get to know these characters over the course of the season, and you get a pause at the end of that show to take it in, and then next week the next episode, and then more digestible. And
they can go into things more. They can go into the religious mythology of the Fremen. They can go into the religious mythology of the. I forget, they refer to them as witches in the movie.
Yeah, I would love to see more with that. I would love to understand and learn more about all of that stuff. And I just don't think there was enough room in the film. It wouldn't have made sense, and we'd be complaining, oh, that's too much, that weighed the film down.
It's like reacting to the 1980s Dune. You're just like, what is going on here?
So much. It's just...
They don't handhold you at all.
So, Dave, the other thing I wanted to talk about was they haven't shot Part 2 yet. I was under the assumption that they might have shot both of these concurrently so that they could release them, within months or a year of each other. And Warner Brothers made a decision similar to that of the Blade Runner sequel. The Blade Runner sequel was originally going to set off another trilogy of films.
Oh, wow.
That film didn't do well at all in the box office. I think critically, people liked it, and even audiences that are in the sci-fi realm enjoyed it. They liked it. I know a lot of Blade Runner fans that actually liked it more than they ever thought that they could. But the movie didn't do well. And that movie did...
Well, it sounds like the Blade Runner curse.
Well, yeah. And it set up clearly at the end that there could be a lot more story to tell in that universe. But it was also a complete film in and of itself. So my fear with this, because everything I read last night was they're waiting to see what the box office is on this before they actually fund and shoot the sequel. And to me, that's really, really disappointing because this film is only complete with Part 2. And so I'm very eager to see what they do with a Part 2. I hope that people do go see this and Warner Brothers decides to finish telling the story.
That's crazy. I'm surprised too. I figured because they've delayed this so long that I thought maybe behind the scenes, the movie was in production, or at least pre-production.
One of the articles I read, Eric Roth, one of the screenwriters, discussed that they had a full story outline and map of what Part 2 is so that the studio saw it, but none of it's been greenlit, and the scripts, according to the interview, hadn't even been fully developed. Maybe during the pandemic they've been doing that. Hopefully Warner Brothers is gearing up to push this out. And if not, maybe they'll say Part 2 is going to come out as a streaming service and help boost their subscribers.
This
for
will
HBO.
launch the series.
Yeah, exactly. And it could. It wouldn't be a bad device.
Yeah.
I mean, because they need subscribers to compete with Disney and Netflix and everything else right now. So, all right. Well, with that, let's get to the vote.
Now, we typically rate the movies. This is a very unique situation for us because we're usually not watching movies before they're in theaters, and we're usually not watching this type of movie, but we like all movies. But we usually rate a movie, so I figured why not rate this one? We have a 3-tiered rating system here at Cinema Craptaculus. The top is Cinema Craptaculus. You have to see this movie. The middle one is Craptaculus, a pretty good watch on a Sunday. And at the bottom, it speaks for itself, utter crap. I think you can kind of tell at least how I'm going to rate this. I would call it Craptaculus.
Yeah.
I think if you're a Dune fan, this is great. I think if you're an everyday sci-fi fan, it's really good. And I think if you're on the periphery of fandom of sci-fi, you may not like this movie.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree and go in the middle. I would love to say Cinema Craptaculus, you got to rush out and go see this right away. I feel like if the sequel was weeks around the corner, I'd probably be more inclined to say that. Yeah. I have to just, you talk about the film as a quote-unquote whole, and again, it's not really a whole, so it's hard to do that. But I would say it's definitely worth seeing. If you're excited to see this, go to the theater. If you're just really on the fence, obviously this will be available on HBO Max or something. You don't have to spend any money on it. I do think that the sound design and everything deserves to be heard and felt in the cinema, but the film as a whole, I really wish I could give it a better Cinema Craptaculus, but I gotta go Craptaculus in the middle of the road.
Thanks for listening to this special Dune sneak preview edition of Cinema Craptaculus.
And let us know what you thought of Dune on Twitter at Craptaculus or on Instagram at Cinema Craptaculus.
And please subscribe to the channel and don't forget to like us and rate us wherever you listen to us. Can we do spoilers now?
Should we tell them that they all get in a convertible and drive off a cliff?
I know. I thought it was crazy when Doc Brown came back and he was like, "Where we're going, we don't need roads."
And I couldn't believe Grogu's in this. I thought it was awesome to see Grogu again.
And on the big screen, that's where he shines. And the fact that they made him 9 years older was impressive too.
And Sting looked amazing.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema Craptaculus. If you'd like to hear all our other episodes, including our other shows like B-Sides, The Expanded Universe, and Terror Tunnel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our new episodes. Go to Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And while you're there, rate us. Give us a good review, we hope. It helps get the Craptaculus word out. And be sure to follow us on social media at Craptaculus on Instagram and Twitter. We're also on Facebook, and you can find more content at cinemacraptaculus.com.